the most radioactive woman in history, killed by her own discovery. 100 years ago, she held death in her hands for 30 years and never knew it. Marie Curie discovered radium, won 2 Nobel Prizes, and became the most celebrated scientist of her era. But the element that made her immortal was destroying her from the inside. Her bones absorbed radiation with every experiment. Her blood cells died one by one. On July 4, 1934, the woman who unlocked the secrets of the atom paid the ultimate price. Her notebooks are still radioactive. To the end will remain deadly for another 1,500 years. This is the true story of science's most tragic genius. 100 years ago, progress came wrapped in promises that no one thought to question, and the price of blind faith was paid in human lives. But her story doesn't end there. In fact, the most disturbing part is just beginning. But first, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on notifications. The year 1926 occupied a strange place in history. The Great War had ended 8 years earlier, leaving behind a world desperate to forget its horrors. In America, the Roaring Twenties were in full swing. Jazz music poured from speakeasies, while prohibition agents lurked in the shadows. Automobiles filled the streets. Radios brought distant voices into living rooms. The future seemed bright, limitless, and unstoppable. Yet beneath the surface of optimism, shadows gathered in ways no one could see. Science was advancing faster than wisdom could follow. Fame was becoming a force more powerful than anyone anticipated. Nature itself was preparing to remind humanity of its insignificance. The people of 1926 believed they stood on the threshold of a golden age. They could not know that some of the choices made that year would echo for generations, shaping laws, changing industries, and leaving scars that would take decades to heal. This is the story of 7 moments from 100 years ago. Some were triumphs, others were tragedies. All of them reveal a world that was stranger, more dangerous, and more fascinating than we often remember. The United States Radium Corporation operated a factory in Orange, New Jersey. Its primary product was luminous paint, used to make watch dials glow in the dark. The paint contained radium, a radioactive element discovered by Marie Curie just 2 decades earlier. At the time, radium was considered miraculous. Companies added it to toothpaste, water, and even chocolate. The public believed it held the secret to health and vitality. The workers who painted the watch dials were mostly young women, some still teenagers. They were paid by the piece, which meant speed was essential. To paint the tiny numbers with precision, they needed fine brush tips. Their supervisors taught them a technique called lip point. Dip the brush in the paint, touch it to your lips to shape the bristle, then apply it to the dial. They repeated this process hundreds of times each day. No one told them the paint was dangerous. When they asked, they were assured it was harmless. By 1926, the first signs of disaster had appeared. Workers began experiencing mysterious symptoms. Their teeth loosened and fell out. Their jaws developed painful sores that would not heal. Some women suffered fractures from simply walking across a room. Doctors were baffled. The company denied any connection to the paint. It took years of legal battles before the truth emerged. The radium had accumulated in their bones, destroying them from within. Many of the radium girls died slow, agonizing deaths. But their fight for justice transformed American labor laws and established the right of workers to sue employers for unsafe conditions. Their suffering became the foundation of modern occupational safety standards. Harry Houdini was the most famous entertainer in America. He had escaped from handcuffs, straitjackets, and locked containers submerged in water. He had freed himself from prison cells and sealed coffins. Audiences watched in disbelief as he defied death again and again. By 1926, he had added a new mission to his career. He had become a crusader against fraudulent spiritualists. The 1920s saw a surge in interest in the supernatural. The devastation of the Great War and the influenza pandemic had left millions grieving. Many turned to mediums who claimed they could communicate with the dead. Houdini, who understood the art of illusion better than anyone, recognized these psychics as con artists preying on vulnerable people. He attended seances in disguise, exposing their tricks to the press. He testified before Congress, urging lawmakers to ban. His campaign made him powerful enemies in the spiritualist community. On October 22, 1926, Houdini was backstage at a theater in Montreal when a young college student asked if it was true that he could withstand any blow to the stomach. Before Houdini could prepare himself, the student punctured him several times in the abdomen. Houdini was already suffering from appendicitis, though he did not know it. The blows may have worsened his condition. He continued performing for several days, despite severe pain. By the time he finally agreed to see a doctor, it was too late. His appendix had ruptured, and infection had spread through his body. Harry Houdini died on October 31st, 1926. The man who had escaped every trap ever devised could not escape the limits of his own body. Before his death, he made a pact with his wife. If communication with the dead was possible, he would send her a secret coded message. She held seances every Halloween for 10 years. The message never came. But before we continue, please help our channel by liking, turning on notifications, and subscribing. The hurricane that broke Miami in the early 1920s. Miami was the center of the greatest land speculation frenzy in American history. Developers transformed swamps into subdivisions. Salesmen sold plots of land to investors who had never visited Florida. Prices doubled, then tripled, then climbed higher still. Everyone believed the boom would last forever. On the night of September 17, 1926, a massive hurricane approached the coast. Weather forecasting in that era was primitive. There was no satellite imagery, no computer models, no advanced warning system. Most Miami residents had never experienced a major hurricane. When the storm made landfall in the early hours of September 18th, winds exceeded 130 miles per hour. Buildings collapsed. Ships were thrown onto city streets. The storm surge flooded entire neighborhoods. Then something terrible happened. The eye of the hurricane passed over Miami, and the winds suddenly stopped. Residents emerged from their shelters, believing the storm had ended. They walked through the debris, searching for neighbors, assessing the damage. They did not understand that they stood in a temporary calm at the center of the storm. Minutes later, the eastern eye wall struck with full force. Many of those who had ventured outside were killed instantly. The official death toll exceeded 400, though the actual number was likely much higher. Entire communities of black workers in the agricultural areas were devastated, and their deaths were never properly counted. The hurricane ended the Florida land boom overnight. Property values collapsed. Banks failed. The disaster foreshadowed the economic catastrophe that would engulf the entire nation just 3 years later. Gertrude Ederer conquers the Channel. The English Channel separates England from France by just 21 miles, at its narrowest point. Yet those 21 miles contain some of the most dangerous waters in the world. Strong currents, cold temperatures, and unpredictable weather had defeated countless swimmers. By 1926, only 5 people had ever successfully crossed the Channel. All of them were men. Gertrude Ederer was a 20-year-old from New York City. She had already won Olympic medals in swimming. In 1925, she attempted the Channel crossing but failed when her trainer pulled her from the water, believing she was drowning. She was not. She vowed to return and finish what she had started. On the morning of August 6, 1926, Ederer waded into the water at Cape Grisness, France. She wore a 2-piece swimsuit and motorcycle goggles to protect her eyes from the salt water. Her body was coated in lanolin and petroleum jelly for insulation. A tugboat accompanied her, carrying her trainer and a small group of supporters. The water temperature hovered around 60 degrees. Currents pushed her off course repeatedly. Storms rolled through, creating waves that crashed over her head. At one point, her trainer urged her to abandon the attempt. She refused, reportedly shouting back a question about what he meant by asking her to quit. 14 hours and 31 minutes after entering the water, Gertrude Ederer walked onto the shore at Kingstown, England. She had not only become the first woman to swim the English Channel, she had beaten the existing men's record by nearly 2 hours. When she returned to New York, an estimated 2 million people lined the streets for a ticker-tape parade. In an era when women were routinely told what they could not do, Ederer answered with actions that no one could deny. The birth of television on January 26, 1926. Members of the Royal Institution gathered in a small laboratory in London's Soho district. They had come to witness a demonstration by a Scottish inventor named John Logie Baird. What they saw was crude by modern standards. Flickering images of a ventriloquist's dummy appeared on a small screen. The resolution was barely 30 lines. The picture was ghostly and unstable. Yet those assembled understood they were witnessing something revolutionary. For the first time in history, moving images had been transmitted wirelessly from one location and reproduced on a screen in another. Baird had achieved what scientists and inventors had dreamed of for decades. He had created television. The road to that demonstration had been long and difficult. Baird worked in poverty, building his equipment from scraps. His early prototypes used cardboard discs, darning needles, and an old tea chest. He had nearly electrocuted himself multiple times. Investors and scientists dismissed him as a crackpot. But he persisted, driven by a vision of technology that could bring the world into people's homes. The television of 1926 was primitive beyond imagination. Decades of development lay ahead before it would become the dominant medium of the 20th century. But the seed was planted in that cramped London laboratory. Within 50 years, television would transform politics, entertainment, culture, and human consciousness itself. Every screen you have ever watched traces its lineage back to that January day when flickering images first danced through the air. Valentino's death and mass hysteria, Rudolph Valentino, was the first true movie star in the modern sense. His dark eyes and exotic features made him the object of unprecedented female adoration. Women fainted at his film premieres. They sent him thousands of letters each week. He represented a new kind of fame, manufactured and amplified by the machinery of Hollywood. In August 1926, Valentino collapsed in New York City. Doctors discovered he was suffering from a perforated ulcer and acute appendicitis. Surgery was performed, but infection spread rapidly. On August 23rd, at the age of 31, Rudolph Valentino died. What followed was unlike anything America had seen before. An estimated 100,000 people attempted to view his body at the funeral home. Riots broke out. Mounted police charged into crowds. Windows were smashed. Several people were hospitalized. Across the country, reports emerged of women committing suicide in grief over a man they had never met. The phenomenon shocked observers who struggled to understand how a movie actor could inspire such extreme devotion. Valentino's death marked a turning point in the relationship between celebrity and public. It demonstrated that modern media could create emotional bonds of disturbing intensity between strangers. The hysteria of 1926 foreshadowed the celebrity obsessions that would define the coming century. The machinery that made Valentino famous had also made his death a collective trauma for millions who knew him only as shadows on a screen, the last golden year of silent film. But first, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In 1926, Hollywood stood at the peak of its silent era. The major studios released hundreds of films each year, and audiences flocked to theaters in unprecedented numbers. The art of visual storytelling had reached extraordinary sophistication. Directors like Buster Keaton, F.W., and Fritz Lang created masterpieces that communicated complex emotions without a single spoken word. The industry had developed its own language. Actors conveyed meaning through exaggerated gestures and facial expressions. Title cards provided essential dialogue and narration. Live orchestras accompanied screenings, their music guiding the emotional responses of audiences. Stars like Clara Bow, Charlie Chaplin, and Greta Garbo commanded enormous salaries and devoted followings. No one in 1926 suspected that this world was about to vanish. The technology for synchronized sound existed but was considered impractical and unnecessary. Studio executives believed audiences preferred the artistic purity of silent film. They were wrong. In October 1927, Warner Brothers released The Jazz Singer, featuring synchronized dialogue sequences. Audiences were electrified. Within 2 years, silent film was essentially dead. The transition destroyed careers overnight. Actors with heavy accents or unpleasant voices found themselves unemployable. Directors who had mastered visual storytelling struggled to adapt to the demands of sound. An entire artistic tradition, developed over 3 decades, was abandoned almost instantly. The films of 1926 represent the final flowering of an art form that would never return. They stand as monuments to a world that believes silence could speak louder than words. Now let's reflect together. 100 years have passed since these events unfolded. The Radium Girls have become symbols of corporate negligence and worker resistance. Houdini remains the greatest magician who ever lived, his name synonymous with escape and wonder. The Miami hurricane has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by the greater disasters that followed. Gertrude Ederer's achievement opened doors for generations of female athletes. Television evolved from a flickering curiosity into the dominant force in human communication. Celebrity culture grew into an industry worth billions, its power to inspire devotion and destruction undiminished. And silent film became a historical artifact, studied by scholars and cherished by the people of 1926 could not have predicted how the world would change. They could not have known that the products they trusted were poison, that the storms they ignored were warnings, that the technologies they dismissed would reshape civilization. They lived, as we all do, in a present moment that seemed permanent but was already transforming into something unrecognizable. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of history. The future is always arriving, whether we prepare for it or not. The choices we make today will echo for generations in ways we cannot foresee. 100 years from now, people will look back at our time with the same mixture of wonder, pity, and disbelief that we feel when we examine 1926. They will ask how we could not have seen what was coming. And they will be right to ask, because the past is never truly past. It lives within us, shaping our present, warning us of dangers we are always too slow to recognize. History is not a collection of dates and names. It is the accumulated weight of human choices, mistakes, and triumphs. By understanding where we have been, we gain the wisdom to navigate where we are going. If these stories from a century ago have changed how you see the past, consider subscribing to this channel. Each week, we explore the forgotten moments that built the world you inhabit today. Leave a comment, sharing which of these 7 facts surprised you most. Your perspective matters, and your engagement helps others discover these stories. Remember, the future is watching. And history never stops being written. Until next time.